By 5 o'clock on 14 June 1800, the Battle of Marengo looked decided. French troops were withdrawing east from the village. Many units had lost formation, and Austrian officers believed they had won. Yet, this battle later became one of the best-known examples of Napoleon's military genius. That reputation hides the central problem. The French victory came only after Napoleon's army had spent most of the day losing ground. His troops were not carrying out a planned retreat. They were trying to avoid collapse, while Austrian guns and cavalry pressed them across the plain. So the real question is not simply how Napoleon won at Marengo. It is how a battle that had gone so badly became proof of his supposed control. To answer that, we must begin with the decision that created the crisis. Several days before the battle, Napoleon had misunderstood what the Austrian army was about to do. Napoleon expected the Austrian commander, Michael von Melas, to avoid battle and search for a route out of Italy. Acting on that assumption, he spread French forces across several widely separated roads. Louis Desaix was sent south to block a possible retreat, while other detachments watched different routes. This deployment made sense only if the Austrians were trying to escape. They were not. Melas had concentrated his army around Alessandria and was preparing to attack through the bridgehead west of Marengo. Napoleon's scouts had failed to reveal the scale of that concentration, and French reports encouraged him to believe the enemy was already withdrawing. When the Austrians advanced on the morning of 14 June, Napoleon did not have his full army in position. The battle began at a time chosen by Melas against French troops that were separated from important reinforcements. Marengo was therefore not a victory unfolding according to Napoleon's design. It was an unexpected battle created by a serious error in judgment. The first warning came from French outposts west of Marengo. Austrian columns had crossed the Bormida through a confined bridgehead and were advancing toward the village. The narrow crossing slowed their deployment, so the full Austrian army could not strike at once. That delay gave the French time to form a line behind the Fontaine, a rain-swollen stream near Marengo. The stream was not a major river, but its steep banks and limited crossings made a direct advance difficult. Trees and farm buildings concealed parts of the French line. Austrian infantry approaching the bank came under close musket fire before it could deploy effectively. Several assaults failed, and the morning battle became far harder than Melas had expected. Napoleon was still behind the front when the fighting began. The first reports did not immediately reveal the scale of the attack. The French defenders were therefore relying on terrain and discipline to buy time. They still faced a larger army with far more artillery, while important reinforcements remained distant. As more Austrian guns entered action, the pressure increased. By early afternoon, the delay created by the Fontaine was finally running out. By early afternoon, the balance had changed. Austrian guns were now deployed in greater numbers, and their infantry had found ways across the Fontaine. French units that had resisted through the morning were running short of ammunition. Once gaps opened in the line, the defenders could no longer protect Marengo from pressure on more than one side. The French left began to give way. Troops withdrew through the village while Austrian soldiers crossed the stream behind them. Several detachments were cut off and captured. Fighting continued around a few farm buildings, but these isolated positions could not repair the line. Napoleon committed the forces still near him, including the consular guard. Those reserves delayed the Austrian advance, but they were too small to reverse the battle. The withdrawal continued east towards San Giuliano. Austrian cavalry forced the French infantry to remain in close formation, making the retreat slower and exposing packed ranks to artillery fire. This was not a controlled maneuver designed to draw Melas forward. The French had lost Marengo and were abandoning the ground they had defended since morning. Their army still existed, but it no longer controlled the battle. By late afternoon, the immediate question was whether it could retreat in enough order to survive, not whether Napoleon's original plan was succeeding. At 71, Michael von Melas had spent most of the day close to the fighting. 2 horses had been shot under him, leaving him physically exhausted. By mid-afternoon, he believed the French army had been decisively beaten. He returned to Alessandria and left his subordinates to complete the pursuit. The Austrians did not stop advancing, but their movement no longer had the urgency needed to destroy the retreating French. Units that had fought since morning had to reorganize before moving east. The main body formed a long pursuit column along the road, while parts of the army remained separated from it. Melas's departure also made responsibility at the front less clear. This mattered because the French retreat had not yet become a complete rout. Their enemies were exhausted, yet they were still moving. Their formations were damaged, but enough battalions remained under control to assemble again near San Giuliano. A faster Austrian advance might have broken them before help arrived. Melas did not deliberately spare Napoleon, and the Austrians were not simply celebrating beside the road. His error was more serious. He treated a likely victory as a completed one. The slower pursuit gave Napoleon time that the battlefield situation should not have allowed him. The force approaching San Giuliano had been absent because Napoleon had sent it south. Louis Desaix was searching for the Austrian route of retreat when distant artillery drew his attention toward Marengo. He sought information about the fighting. Once Napoleon's recall reached him, he turned Boudet's division around and marched toward the guns. Desaix reached Napoleon before most of his soldiers arrived. Behind him came nearly 5,000 infantry who had not spent the day defending the Fontanon. They were tired from marching, but they still had organized battalions and ammunition. No other French force could provide the same reserve. Their arrival allowed Napoleon to halt the retreat near San Giuliano and prepare a line. It also gave him the means to consider a counterattack. This did not make Desaix the sole author of the coming victory. His infantry would still need artillery support, while the Austrian advance had to be struck at the right moment. Without Desaix, however, there was no fresh formation capable of changing the battle. The French might have continued retreating, but they had little basis for recovering Marengo. Desaix had returned in time to prevent defeat from becoming final. He would not survive the attack that made the reversal possible. Near San Giuliano, Napoleon used Desaix's division to form a new line. Marmont gathered the French guns and opened fire on the approaching Austrian column. The bombardment slowed its advance and allowed the infantry to move forward. Desaix's men then attacked. He was struck and killed soon after the advance began, but the formation continued under its remaining officers. The Austrian front halted to meet the pressure, and its long column became harder to control. Kellermann then led a cavalry charge against the Austrian flank. His horsemen struck units already compressed along the road and distracted by French infantry. The local collapse spread through the pursuing column. General Desaix was captured, and soldiers farther back began to retreat before they understood what had happened. The victory did not come from a single order. Desaix's fresh infantry made the attack possible, while Marmont's artillery weakened the Austrian front. Once an opening appeared, Kellermann struck before the Austrians could redeploy their front. The battle ended in victory, but its meaning changed afterward. Later reports issued under Napoleon reduced the importance of his misjudgment and presented the afternoon retreat as a temporary setback. Desaix was not removed from the story. He was honoured as a commander who died at the moment of victory. That tribute made his return appear to confirm Napoleon's leadership rather than expose the consequences of sending him away. The account gave less attention to the other officers and exhausted soldiers. This version served a political purpose. Napoleon had taken power months earlier, and defeat in Italy could have weakened his position. Marengo allowed him to appear as the leader who had recovered from danger and delivered victory. The battle, therefore, reveals a mixed record. Napoleon created the crisis through misjudgment, then used the opportunity provided by others. His reputation depended on remembering the recovery more clearly than the error.